Yes, so I thought this was a great event to be able to put on in conjunction with our high performance meet. And we're really privileged to be able to have some fantastic athletes across Canada be able to come in, share. And the biggest thing is being able to share your experience so that we're able to pass on knowledge for the next generation of athletes. So yes, my name is Angela White. I'm a 3-time Olympian in the event of 100-meter hurdles. I also dabbled a little bit here and there in the multi. So able to kind of speak to multiple events, or at least pretend to for the most part. And very happy to be able to be here to moderate and just get some good conversation going with our athletes that are here today. So again, to my left, Sultana Frizzell, 2-time Olympian, 2008 and 12. Marco Arup, he's our Edmonton local athlete. And then Sarah Mitten, who you probably have seen on the circuit as well as Marco. So yeah, let's get started. So instead of me giving the rundown on everybody, I'd like for everybody to give their rundown on themselves, because I don't want to get anything wrong. But I think the biggest thing is I'd like to get a kind of a history out of how did you get to where you got to? So first, let's start with Sultana, and we're going to have to pass this mic along because pass the mic. So I guess the first question is, how did you start? How did you end up being a 2-time Olympian, or just an Olympian, multiple-time Olympian? Where did that start?
With a sobriety test. I was this little go-getter in the Ottawa Valley. I came from a town of 6,000 people. Little dyslexic, sorry. Not a lot of opportunities, but still enough to have like a really good basis. I joined the gymnastics team. I was a competitive figure skater for many years. Thank you. I also my mom decided that since I'm an only child, I needed to have an individual sport and a team sport. So she put me in boys baseball. Crushed it. Had an appreciation for team sports, had an appreciation for individual sports. And honestly, if anyone out there has been a figure skater or a gymnast, you know that walking into a stadium of 90,000 people is nothing compared to being judged by one older Skate Canada judge peering over her glasses, watching every single element that you are trying to execute and trying to do it well and pass whatever level that you need. So walking out and throwing a hammer in like 90,000 people in Beijing or in London, that's a no-brainer. That's totally fine. Humble beginnings. Went to my first track meet in high school, was identified by another high school coach and was like, hey, it looks like you kind of can throw some things far, at least further than everyone else here. There's this name of this guy. He's in Ottawa, which is about an hour away. I think if you like track and field, and especially the throws, you should go check this out. And I walked in and I never looked back. It was like the first time of me like being with this group of throwers. It was like I found my people. I was like, I'm a little bit different in my town. I'm a little bit weird. I really like these odd events. And as soon as I walked in and in like my first throwing practice, I'm like, yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be. And he heard, like, his name's Joe Burke. I don't know if you know him. He's kind of awesome. He basically decided that the Legion track and field was happening, and he's like, you were a figure skater. Sultana, I need you to spin around 10 times and walk a straight line. And I'm like, Joe, I got this. This is happening. Thank you. So I spun around and I walked a straight line, and he put a hammer in my hand, and he's just like, this is where it begins. And it was such an interesting development of hammer because he didn't know a lot about it. I knew nothing about it. I just had a figure skating background. So I was going to try anything, and I had good footwork. And these slow, steady builds in shot put, discus, javelin, and hammer led me down the pathway of getting an NCAA D1 scholarship to the University of Georgia. And I did everything at the University of Georgia. We need to throw weight into that because that's a great event. super heavy, super awesome, but Canada only has weight throw and shot put for our throwers here in the nation, and so going across the border is something usually we have to do. And I was fortunate enough to get a Power 5 school in the SEC, and I had a very great experience having a roommate that made it to the Olympics before I did. So that was, I had some pettiness right there, because she went for Argentina, and we basically threw the same distance, and I was like, why does she get to go and I don't? And I looked at the qualification for Canada at that time, and I believe it was the two-tiered system of you need to throw B standard X amount of times, and then you need to go over IAAF standard for an A.
It used to be very all over the place.
I feel like some of the coaches out here know what I'm talking about. And, but you also need to do it at this event when I told you you had to do this event, and then maybe in another continent.
With a certain wind.
With a certain wind. And I get it. Like, it was hard to make the team, but Canada wanted to produce, top 16, top 8, and medalists at that time, and that was the format. And I stayed home, and she went to Athens, and I sat there in my dorm room, and I'm just like, this is never happening again. And Alberta has a special place in my heart, specifically Lethbridge. Yes, thank you. Lethbridge, and I have to give a shout out to the Stacey family, because they are the ones that ran the Throws Gala. So Throws Gala, right? It was the first place that I qualified to make karting, which meant that I was financially stable to continue my sport, because in that transition year from university to high performance sport, that is a big leap. And I don't know, I know throwing, that's a big leap, but in the other events in track and field, it can also be a big leap. I was working 3 jobs, and one of them was not a pretty one. And when you're having to clean other people's toilets, and you're thinking about yourself, and you're like, wow, do I really want to continue doing this sport? And you go out to this throws gala, and you throw the distance that you need to throw to get karting, you're like, yep, I will clean everybody's doo-doo. I don't care, it's happening. I will do as many jobs as I need to continue this. The following year, came back to the throws gala. It was the very last meet. It was the last chance meet before you could go to the Olympics. And I remember throwing 70 meters, .000. And and the Stacey family was over the moon. They have a special place in my heart. And yes. And I was the first person to throw over 70 meters in Canada, and then start that whole, kind of break that glass ceiling of people in North America going over 70 meters. And that was just really cool. And I'm so glad that I did it in Canada, and I'm so glad I did it in Lethbridge. All right. That's all.
Okay, you two. Beat that.
I'm retired, and I'm here on behalf of Cameron, so I'm sorry.
A little tidbit of I guess, some behind the scenes. Sultan and I have been roommates many, many times on many, many different teams. It's a unique art. Anybody that's been an administrator who needs to do rooming lists, it's a unique art, because I'm very messy. As soon as I walk in, my suitcase has blown up, and she's like, just as long as you keep it on your side. But we were fantastic roommates, and great honor to be on many teams with this fantastic athlete. And I actually do want to give a little shout out to Heather Stacey in the back. We have another Olympian in the room, so she came up to support this meet. Again, I think it just shows that in Canada we have this wealth of experience and an interest to continue to see it grow, and us supporting the next generation. With all that being said, yeah, Marco, follow that.
I'm so sorry, Marco.
Should have put Sultan at the end there. But anyways, same question. Kind of give us a little bit of a brief history. How did you get to where you are? Kind of how did you start in this sport? How did you start in sports in general? Because we know that it's usually not just, I started track at 2 years old. Not of Mondo Duplantis is in the room, right? It's usually you start somewhere else. So how did you get started?
All right, thank you, Angela. This is probably going to be a lot shorter. I don't really have a whole lot to say, but I actually had a really similar experience starting in track and field as Sultan. It was really cool to hear your story because I resonate with that a little bit. And I've always kind of been athletic, like just involved in sports since I was a kid. I played soccer in elementary, basketball with my brothers, just always doing something, some form of physical activity, and actually did quite a bit of track at a very young age. So if any of you know, like, I think running room games was the name of it, or general indoor games at the time. So I did that in elementary, and then junior high, went to a Catholic school in Western Edmonton, or West Edmonton. And then kind of got away from it going into high school. I started playing basketball I guess all years of high school up until my final year, 12th grade. My basketball coach had always been trying to convince me to run track and field because he could see that I've got some potential in it, and every year I would just find some excuse not to do it because I'd used to run before and I just didn't like it. Honestly, it was cross country. I was afraid of cross country. Just running the long distance, that was something that I never wanted to do again. And so my final year of high school, I'm finished basketball season, was just thinking, sure, let's do it for fun. Let's just sign up. Let's enter the 3K, the 1500, and the 800 and see what happens. And thankfully, my coach had the sense to tell me, maybe don't do the 3K, try the 400 instead. And yeah, my first track meet in high school was, my first event was the 400, and that was where I met my coach, Ron Thompson. I don't know if many of you probably know him. Yeah, so he was similar to you, that person that kind of found me and then got me entered into a track club, and from there on it just spiraled into where I am now. So that was my first experience training, like with the track club with other athletes, and I never realized how much, how much work was you have to put into the sport. I just thought, if you're fast, you just show up to the track and you just run. I didn't know we had to do stuff like core and hurdle mobility and stretching. Yeah. And right. And yeah, another thing I learned was warming up and cooling down. That was foreign to me. And no, it was really cool just entering the world of track and field for the first time in my eyes, because I don't think up until that point I'd really understood what the sport was all about. And from there on, I've met so many amazing people, so many cool teammates, competitors. Just the support in the community is what's encouraged me and helped me get to where I am now. So just like Sultan, I competed locally, and then eventually got to a point where I was recognized by a few universities over in the States, and kind of had to decide whether I wanted to stay in Canada or go to the NCAA in the US. And my thought process was if I want to be one of the best in the world, I have to find the best athletes. And for me, that was same thing, just going down and competing there. So fortunately, I was able to get a scholarship and compete at the University of Mississippi State University. And that was just a whole nother experience, being in a college environment, training in a team of 100 athletes. And so my whole life just became studying and running. And it's very simple when you put it that way. It's just, but just focusing on those two things just got me from my first national team, my first senior national team in Toronto, actually. That was basically how I got into Team Canada. And the thing is, I didn't really have any problems with, I always just thought if I just hit the standard, just hit the standard. It sounds so easy, but the worst thing is just being so close. And fortunately, I was able to hit the mark at my first NCAA championships, and that kind of got me entered into the senior team. So from there on, it's been to two world championships, my first Olympics in Tokyo, it's been an incredible experience, and it all started here in Edmonton, and I'm glad to be here with like some amazing athletes and see the future generation of athletes here. It's just incredible. It's inspiring, and I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, Sarah. It's like after two, it's like, what do I say? Ditto, yeah. But I know Sarah a little bit. I moved to Toronto to kind of finish out my career. Haven't officially retired yet, but so I've been able to meet some amazing athletes. Sarah Mitten, one of them, be able to kind of see the work that goes in the different places. You see, it's always seemingly similar, no matter where you go, the amount of work and the dedication and stuff. And I know that Sarah and I have a common thread in terms of athletic experience a little bit, in terms of, and I'll let her explain. But I'd like to know, from Nova Scotia to Toronto to the world, how did you get to where you are now? Do I have enough room?
Yeah, so I guess as Angeles mentioned, like I grew up on the east coast of Canada in a small town in Nova Scotia. My graduating class was about 60 to 70 people. So a pretty small high school and not a lot around us. And so we had no track in our area, so I had to commute to do my training and practices. But just a little bit before that, so I just want to say thank you to all the high school coaches, because I think we all have a similar experience, as you were very athletic growing up, and I dabbled in soccer, gymnastics, basketball, pretty much anything that was going around in the community. I think my parents just wanted me to burn off some energy. And without them, I don't think I would have made it to the place where I could have gone from Toronto to the world. So with that being said, like I started track and field in grade 8. I had just gone to a local meet for high school district championships. So maybe the 4 communities in my area were competing, and it was like my first time throwing shot put ever. And this coach picked me out of the crowd. I had thrown, further than all the other girls, but at that time I had no idea what that even meant. And she was super excited. She was very enthusiastic to get me to continue to throw shot put, even though it was like my first week doing this sport. I was like, okay, like I'll ask my mom if I can come to practice. And yeah, as Sultana mentioned, it was just from then on, I was going to be like a shot putter or a throw or anything like that. It was just a really great fit. So for me, that really meant like having that commitment, because I lived about 45 minutes from training. So, I'm 15 with no license, and my mom and all of my parents and my brother were driving me back and forth to practice 2 or 3 times a week. But I continued to play other sports throughout that, and she was a really big advocate for being an athlete first and not specializing in the throws too early, or specializing in any event too early. So that was really great. So I got to continue to play soccer and basketball all through high school, which was really awesome. And so my biggest experience would be, traveling through high school, winning, I guess, Nova Scotia provincials at one point was a big highlight, and deciding whether or not I was going to take sport to the next level is going to university. Wasn't quite sure I was going to go to the States. Didn't know if I really had the marks for it. So I ended up traveling to Ontario to kind of investigate the scene outside of kind of like Atlantic Canada, to see what was out there to offer. And, I went to Guelph, to London, and to Windsor on like a tour. Stopped at York to not meet my current coach. So that's a future story. And I ended up choosing to go to the University of Windsor on a scholarship, which was awesome. So I packed everything up, and moved to the University of Windsor to continue my track and field career. Things went really well there. I had some ups and downs with some coaches and some coaching changes, but that long-term growth kept me in the sport. And come 2017, I did decide to continue on and give it a go for the Olympic team. But that meant trying to find that fit for post-collegiate. And I had a previous connection with my coach, Richard Parkinson, in 2015, 14. So my coach from high school, who was coaching me kind of like through that period in the summers, took me to a coaching conference in Moncton, New Brunswick, for her like NCCP course or something. And I was just along for the ride to see if I could get some help, try to throw a little bit further. And she left me out there with him while she went to go do her exam. And right off the bat, like, we knew that it would be a fit. He had me spinning in the shot put for the first time ever, and I had thrown what would have been my old PB. So right from there, I knew that that would probably be like the next step for me. And so I continued on. I had 2 more years of university, went to Toronto in the summer to work with him again to see if it would be a good fit. And he got me to would be World University Games, which was in Taiwan. So that was my first international experience ever, and it went really well. And again, so another kind of check in the box. And so decided to kind of leap of faith, move to Toronto in 2018, and we decided to make that switch to the rotational shot put. And within a year, I became a national team member, basically. I threw a new Canadian record, and everything kind of just took off from there and has continued to accelerate forward from that moment. Yeah.
Sarah, I'm disappointed in you because you neglected to leave out our common thread about this. Yes, you played soccer, basketball, other sports, but you also did the pentathlon indoors. You competed in the pentathlon, and we bonded over our favorite event. And Marco, you'll be happy in knowing that our favorite event is the 800. Those are lies. We don't like the 800. It's a very tough event, so we very much appreciate anybody that takes on the 2 laps that seemingly is now just a sprint. It's just a 2-lap sprint. So we appreciate all the athletes that participate in that. So anyways, I needed to say that. I thought you were going to bring that up, but you didn't. So I think the biggest thing is when we see athletes on TV, we get to see them at their best. They're clearly at some event that's being televised. So we get to see them when they're at their best. But there's so much that goes into the background, what's happening behind the scenes, the ups and the downs. I know that all of you have probably experienced some sort of barrier, some sort of metaphorical hurdle. So I'd like to kind of discuss that, and we'll go the reverse order now. So we'll go to Sarah first. What I think the biggest thing is with high-performance athletes, perseverance is key, because there's going to be those moments, and Sultan, you kind of already alluded to it, where you're going to have to do things, or you're going to come up against barriers that make you question whether or not this is something you want to do, because you sacrifice so much to do this, right? Like you are spending a lot of time doing something that not a lot of people want to do or are able to do, because sometimes it's circumstances. There's fantastic athletes that just don't have the environment to be able to get to the next level. But we all deal with things that go, man, is this for me? Can I keep doing this? So I'd like to know, have there been any barriers in your career? And if so, what are the things that you're able to do, or who are the people that were instrumental in getting you through those barriers? So we'll start with Sarah, please.
All right, so I think probably one of the hardest barriers I've had to overcome in my career is like the mental barrier. Learning how to compete on the international scene, learning how to perform on demand, learning how to like deal with all of those expectations from like the outside perspective, but also myself, because as athletes, I think, you know, we're probably the hardest on ourselves, and that, you know, sort of mental self-talk can get really loud sometimes. And when I was going through the University of Windsor, it was almost like every time I would PB every year, I would have like these really great successes, and then come championship season, I would either not make the final, I would foul out, I would throw really terribly at these like major meets for me. So like a U Sports, I would go, in ranked second, I would come out, wouldn't make the final. That was like sort of like a history that I had repeating itself. And so going through that, you continue to tell yourself the story that something is wrong and you can't, you're going through like the growing stages, but you start to question whether or not like this is for you. Like you're not seeing those results in kind of like the tangible medals or like the tangible successes, but you're seeing some results on the back end. And so for a long time, like I thought that I couldn't compete. Like I didn't know how to compete at this level, and how was I going to be able to mentally handle that? And then similarly, I moved to Toronto to compete, and I had like my first success at like a major, which would have been that Taipei World University Games, where it was the first time that I had really gone into a season where I had a personal best like at an event that I was supposed to. And I mean, I still didn't make the final, but it was like a little glimmer of hope. And we started, my coach Richard actually talked to a sports psychologist, and he thought that she would be a really great fit for me. And she is still on my team today, but that mental block that I had, we've been able to like spend the last, I think I've been working with her now since 2018, 2019. So about 4 years of work to be able to like overcome a lot of those external and internal pressures and learn how to, compete on the world scene and be able to be on your best. And so I think like that has completely changed like my perspective on like high performance sport and how I view myself as an athlete. So I think for me, that's probably one of the hardest barriers I've had to overcome. But if it wasn't for like my coach who had put me in contact with her, I'm not sure like I would be where I am today.
Yeah, just keep going. Yeah, I think what people see, like on TV and online, it's always the good. It's never the ugly. And as we all know, I think just life in general can be ugly sometimes. I think sports, it's as much as there's good, there's also a struggle. You're sacrificing sacrificing time, energy, and things don't always go well. And I think, like you said, just being the ability to persevere is so important in the sport. I've been pretty fortunate to have like a relatively smooth career. It wasn't always ups. There was a few injuries, a few doubts along the way, but I think one thing that's always helped me was the support system that I have around me, just the people in my corner that I've always leaned into, and that includes more than just the track side. It's also my family, my friends, because when things aren't going well, I tend to sit back and look at the bigger picture, and there's it's always like a hard pill to swallow. Like there's more to life than track, and if I'm not having a great day, maybe I'm going through an injury or not able to perform the way I want, I have to think like this is a pretty good problem to have. Like my coach always says, if the worst part of your day was you weren't able to finish the rep on time, like you had a pretty good day. And like that's not always what I want to hear, but it's the truth. And I think us as athletes, we put so much pressure on ourselves, and we have so much pressure coming from the outside as well. And I think just the ability to handle those pressures, and it goes for every aspect of life. I think just being able to finding what works for you, like Sarah mentioned, working with other people like a sports psychologist is really helpful, because we can't always do it alone. And I think that's what's helped me on my journey is not trying to do everything by myself, because I don't think I would have gotten very far on my own. I probably would have stopped after my first season. But yeah, just I've got to give a lot of credit to the support team, like my family, my friends, my coaches. I've had plenty of coaches along the way, and yeah, just always leaning into the people around you. I think that's what's helped me, and it's going to continue to help me. That's for sure.
So many crashes and burns. But I do think, I touched on it earlier, just the first kind of hurdle of getting onto the international stage was definitely the biggest one. And coming out of the university circuit where, like, you're kind of given everything. Like, in the NCAA, you have your team, you have your support, you're going to school, you have all of these, like, this community, you have all of your kind of, like, life aspects fulfilled. And then all of a sudden you, like, graduate, you leave, you do what you need to do, and boom, that's done. Nothing is there for you afterwards, especially coming out of the NCAA and coming back into a Canadian program. And at the time, because I'm so old, there were not too many throwing areas within Canada, and needing and wanting, and I'm going to push back a little bit on sacrifices, because I feel like sometimes, like, we say that as kind of like, you know, the default, but you're choosing yourself. You're choosing to make this this lifelong dream. You're choosing a goal. You're choosing to do things that, like, nobody else will do, and you're putting that time and effort into yourself to grow as a person, to grow as an athlete, and I'm on the fence of calling it a sacrifice. And I chose to keep going in the sport at that time of coming out of the US and coming back into Canada. But my biggest hurdle was finances. And I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to go. I don't know what group I'm going to be with. And all I knew is that I wanted to throw a ball really far. And that's weird. Like who wants to do that? But I knew that I wanted to do it. And I knew that I had to make the choices to try to keep going. And I left my home at 18 and I came back at 35. And so there's a huge gap in there of me struggling and trying to make do, but, like, somehow I persevered. And, you know, working those 3 jobs, you know, training at that time, because I'm working so much, I could only train 1 time a day, which meant that workout was anywhere from 3 to 4 hours. And then you go and you do a job. And then you sleep and you get up and you do it again. Because the end goal is I need to make karting, because if I'm going to have any success on being on the international circuit, I need to be doing 2 workouts a day. And how do I get there, and who do I get there with? And so as soon as I was able to chip away and, you know, come to Alberta and make that first hurdle, metaphorically, never did hurdles. It put me in a position where I could say, oh my God, everyone's going to British Columbia to work with this, you know, Anatoly Bondarchuk. And that was the place where I'm like, I'm back in my community. There's a group of throwers. We all have the same goal of going to the Olympics, and we're all here supporting each other. I really, like, my parents, they were there from day one, but, like, me going out and doing that, there was nobody. I was alone, and the only people I had were the people that showed up with me every day at, you know, 6, 7, 8 in the morning, whatever time you needed to get in to start, because facilities, like, let's all talk about facilities for a second. What time can you get in here to throw something in Canada? Sometimes you don't have access. Sometimes it's a stupid time that you have to get up and you have to put the work in. And I was so lucky and so fortunate to get into British Columbia and into Kamloops and have that group again and in a high performance perspective. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay.
I think that's it.
Sultana, I really liked the fact that you kind of flipped it on its head, the word sacrifice. I think we use that a lot. It's kind of default. You're making sacrifices for your dream. But I think if we look at it, you're making choices. And usually your support system, your family, you're really good friends, because you're going to be challenged where some friends are like, why can't you come out and do this? And it's like, well, because I've got training at 4 a.m. because the facility is only going to allow us to throw these cannonballs at that time. But I do like, and I think maybe this is a really good point for coaches, is language is very powerful, and the way that we state things, it shows the intention, it gives direction. And I think changing the word, if you're working with an athlete, not saying you're making a sacrifice, you say you're making a choice, that gives more power. Because when you say sacrifice, it means that you're giving up something that is also equally important. But I think a lot of times, and this is, you know, even in my career, and hopefully you all have kind of stated this, your support group, they're right there with you. So you don't feel like you're making a sacrifice. I know that a lot of us, we've had to make the choice to stay and train or go away to a meet, and we may miss some moments with our friends and family, but they're like, go. You don't have to, it's not a sacrifice, it's a choice, and we want to be able to see you go to that meet that's going to help you get to the next level or whatever. So I think being very aware of language and how you're using it. I know when I was coaching in the NCAA and everybody would say, oh, I have to be at practice. And I was like, listen, you don't have to be here at all. Actually, you don't have to do anything in life. There's a couple of things you need to do to survive, eat, sleep, have shelter, but you don't have to do anything. So I want you to change that and say, like, I'm going to. Again, it gives power, it gives direction. If you say you have to when you show up to practice, then you're kind of sludging through. I can probably see it. But if you say, I want to, or I'm going to, it changes the whole thing. But notice in your life how many times you say you make a sacrifice or how many times you say, I have to. Take a moment and go, listen, I don't have to do anything, but I want to. And that's giving more power and direction to what you're doing. So I'm going to step off my soapbox for a second and continue on. I think, how many coaches in the room? Raise your hands. Good. Parents? Parents? Okay, so this is the group that's hoping they see their athlete, their child athlete, and kind of want to know, and coaches who are working with very young athletes, they're probably all wondering, and maybe you've had your own successes, obviously, getting athletes to whatever the next level is. We have very varying level of coaches, whether or not you're just but you are the most important coaches, the grassroots coaches are very important. And you're wondering, how do I get my athlete to that next level? What is it that I can do? What are some of the things that I can do to help my athlete get to the next level? So we'll go then this way, and you can just pass the mic on down. What advice could you give to coaches of various levels, whether it's grassroots, whether it's kind of that development or high performance? What are those things, from your perspective as a high performance athlete, what can you do as a coach or as a parent to help get your athlete to that next level?
Support our weird. Support the journey. My high school coach, he had 5 daughters or 4 daughters. He was very good at coaching females. I would say that like he knew me better than I knew myself at that time, and he allowed me the space to do what I wanted to do, but I was a very committed person at that time. And I told him, I was like, I really want to do this, and I want to train. Like I had to drive to Ottawa, which was about an hour and a half, and my mom was very willing to take me an hour and a half to do this. And he showed up. He showed up every single time for practice. He showed up with goals because I don't know. Like, I don't know where I'm supposed to be or like what I'm supposed to be doing at that time in my infancy of track and field. And he basically sat me down and he made me an all-around person. He gave me the initiative to give me that space to find myself. And he put together a goals. And he's just like, if you like all the throwing events, let's do them all. Like, let's find out where Sultana fits. And I actually really like them all. Even javelin. Like, I even enjoy javelin. But I think just having the freedom with him to like not pigeonhole me into shot put because that was my best event. It was like, hey, let's find out who you are. Let's provide you with the stability of, you know what, you really like track and field? I'm going to give you a lifting program. You're going to be doing this 6 days a week because you seem to really like what you're doing. And I appreciated that for him. And when I told him, you know what, I really want to play volleyball in high school. Is that okay? He's like, absolutely. You need to go and do your team sports for your high school because you love hanging out with those kids and I'll be here when you get back. And so just that type of freedom, support, and goal setting really took me into the later part of my career. And I still have that aspect in me too, of how I'm coaching or how I'm talking to people is giving space to find out who you are and really try everything. And so I really appreciate that about him.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Yeah, I think like when I first started out, I didn't really know much of what was going on either. It was just like I couldn't really think so far ahead. I didn't know where I would be today, and just having a coach that would show up was everything. Because, I mean, yeah, just being able to know that there's a plan for you. Might not know where that plan will take you. You just know that there's goals along the way, and yeah, just the support that I received at such a young age was it my job that much easier. I don't want to say job because it never feels like a job. It's always like I was just showing up and having fun in training, and you know, coach told me that if I keep working hard and if I keep showing up to practice, then one day I could make it to the Olympics and you know, be a world-class athlete. And yeah, I don't even think I believed that then. I thought he was just saying that, or I thought people would just say these things just to encourage me to keep running. And yeah, I mean, years later, I'm where I am today because just coach would show up, and of course my parents would just find a way to get me to practice. I mean, they had to raise 6 boys, so I can imagine like just the amount of stress that they were going through, just making sure that we were all safe and putting food on the table, and then also making sure that I was getting to practice and coming back home every single day. So that was it for starting out. I didn't see the end goal. Even to this day, sometimes I still don't know where the end goal might be or what that might look like. All I know is that if I keep showing up and there's people on my team that'll just be there for me, it just makes everything much easier.
I have kind of two thoughts on this, and I'll preface which, you know, I've been really fortunate with coaching. I've really only had 2 really main players in my life, and both of them believed in me more than I believed in myself, and I think they're the main reason that I am where I am. And the first one from a developmental perspective would be my biggest piece of advice, and it's what led to that transition to Toronto, is my coach growing up was, and she'll admit it, is she knew shot put, but not to an extent where she could get me to the Olympics. She saw that I had this talent. She saw that I had the drive and the commitment, but she was constantly dragging me and herself to coaching conferences to get me in different positions, to get different coaching and different ideas, and always continuously trying to grow and learn to put me in the best position to excel. And just that lack of ego that she had, being able to accept help from everybody for my best interest was really big. And that's again how I got placed with Richard today. And she knew from the minute that I started getting too good, she would say, I got to find somewhere to send you. I don't know what to do with you anymore. And so she was constantly looking for people to help me out. And that was really important for me, because I do still see a lot of the times there are coaches who are not willing to let athletes move on to another facet in life. And I think, there are people who fit your needs now, and you need to continuously grow and find different situations to put you in those positions. And that change is really hard, and it can be really scary as a developmental coach to want to let go of someone. But just remember that you're a huge part of their developmental success, and putting them in the position where they can then go on to be, to realize their potential and become an Olympian or to become a national team athlete. And I think that's really important to recognize where you are, where they are, and what their needs are, because ultimately it's their career and you're a piece of their journey. And then I think as a national team athlete and working with Richard as more of a senior member, and I know a little bit more than I did now. Richard might disagree, but the thing that's worked with us over the last couple of years is, when I first got to Toronto, again, this dynamic was definitely coach athlete. I still didn't have the experience and the knowledge to be a part of that conversation as much as like I wanted to be. And so I listened to everything. I did what I needed to do. And now as we grow together, we have more of a coach-athlete relationship, and we work as a team really, really well. And I think that that's what's led to like all of the successes over the last couple of years, is being able to, you know, communicate really effectively with one another and communicate the goals and what we're looking for, either technically or physically or mentally. And that's worked really well for us. So just as a, you know, if you're looking for that more high performance mindset, and I think it can apply to the younger athletes as well, kind of as Sultana alluded, like let them be a part of the conversation. And I think that can lead to some really, really, really big things.
Okay, perfect. So far, absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, your knowledge that you've been able to gain just through working with various coaches, different levels, just going through this track and field athlete life. Right now, do we have anybody in the audience that might have a question? Yeah, just stand up where you are and yell it out, and also say who, if specifically you have somebody that would like to answer, then just let us know.
Not a problem. You guys are excellent role models, past, present, obviously, and the future is in this room. So, do you think the support that you're getting from Athletics Canada, for the government of Canada, is enough? And I know it's never enough, but do you think that we're taking a small step behind the bigger sports like football, basketball, hockey?
Who wants to take this?
I think karting's gone up since I've left, so
That's
Yeah.
part of it.
I think it's slightly gone up since, I can yell it out. I can yell it out
From the diaphragm.
from the back of the room. Wait, what was the question? Is it
Well, do you
enough?
feel like you have
Is it
enough?
enough? Did I feel like I had enough at that time? I can tell you right now I was a basement dweller, and I definitely found the cheapest place that I could that met all of my needs at the time where I was, because I could not stay in Ontario to do what I needed to do. I couldn't stay in my parents' house. Like, you know, it would have been lovely to be able to, you know, save that money for training camps and whatever I needed to do, you know, cross-border, because we have a winter up here. But I was making it work, and people were gracious enough in Kamloops to, like, I think I may have paid $300 for a room and board situation at that time, because I was only making what karting is. It worked at that time. In these bigger cities, I don't know how that works. With the training hubs being in Toronto, I don't know how that money works at all. Kamloops, I was able to get my needs met. Is it enough? It's never enough. If we're getting karting, I think there is a little bit of a bracket of our higher tiered athletes being able to, like, have extra funding to go to the training camps, which, you know, that definitely helps. But, you know, what are the provincial branches doing for that that development that hasn't quite made it to high performance yet? And that's where you're losing people. And I don't know what the answer is, but it's not enough.
That was a really good point, and I know they're doing what they can to help the athletes. But like Sultan said, I think the most important part of my career was being in that stage where I wasn't quite a national team athlete yet, and still living at home with my parents, of course. Just I didn't have a job. I was right after high school, just training and thinking of where to go for university, and I didn't really have like any plans on the financial side of things. It was just, as long as I can show up to the track and run. Of course, it's a lot easier not having to you know, like, need access to the gym all the time, but fortunately I had a lot of help from, like, you know, Edmonton Track and Field and Athletics Alberta, from all the programs that they have. And that was what was able to get me to that next stage, to the national team athlete. And even to this day, they've been, huge supporters and have helped me along in my journey. And yeah, I think like Sultan said, it's never enough. You can always, the more support you have, the better off you'll be as an athlete, because it just keeps going. There's always a camp. There's always a better place to train. There's always things that you can add to make your environment and your training system that much better. And I think Athletics Canada is doing a great job right now, just helping the athletes get what they need. But to get to that next level, there's always, I don't know. There's just so many factors. It's hard for me to say whether that'll like great or not. But yeah, if you want to.
I do live in Toronto at one of the hubs, and I'll say now it's easier than it was. Right out of university, and unlike these two, I didn't have it quite as good at university as the NCAA, but came out of school with some student debt, of course, and looking to then, on top of that, move into a sport where there's very limited funding, especially in that like beginning stage. It's definitely not enough at that point. Like you're graduated and you need to either move or make a leap. And for me, that wouldn't have happened without certain people supporting me outside of that. I could not afford to have actually moved to Toronto in 2018, right after I graduated, without any family support. My family's all out east. We're quite middle class. There was not my parents weren't going to be supporting this journey for me, and so that decision came with a part-time job for sure, and as well as I was just very fortunate to have lucked into a situation with some outside support to help me do that. But without those two people, I wouldn't be here, because I wouldn't have been able to afford to move to Toronto to even start that journey, and I'm not sure that I would have made the choice to go somewhere else, just with the situation and where I was at the time. So I think that and I've talked to a lot of athletes about the post-university transition. I have a teammate who's in that situation right now, and explaining it gets better, but it's really hard that first few years to, meet all of your needs in all of these areas, like food, housing, training, coaching. All of those have an associated cost with them, and I think you can do it. And if you are fortunate enough to be in a space where you can be on karting, you are still making a choice, but you will have you are not living glamorously to do so. That's for sure. So we are definitely behind all the other sports. There needs to be a lot more funding, but yeah, that's my take.
I'm going to add. I think it's definitely different between professional sport and amateur sport, and we are definitely in that that weird. Yes, there's a professional side of it, but when we're that young, trying to hit the international circuit, we are still very much amateur, and it's what are our provincial branches doing for us for, the coaching element, access to facilities, and opportunity? What kind of opportunity do we have to bring in, these throwing events, the distance events, everything that we need to, build these athletes into high performers? And yes, I think there's some twilight meets here and there, but it's definitely the meets like Edmonton and like the Throws Gala that create opportunities and don't put barriers in the way of these athletes just trying to get to the next level. At the end.
The end. Listen, don't get me started. No, I think it's manyfold. Obviously, if there were pots of gold everywhere, that would be great. However, I think there's certain ways to look at it. So you have to know what you need first for an athlete to be successful, right? So how many meets do you need? What level of meet? And what kind of training? And I think as you're starting to find out, there's a fantastic track and field community. If you look at the vaulters, and we have some vaulters in this room, I know at least Robin, they have a great community in where, if you need to come and crash on a couch so that you can do a little bit of a training camp here, somebody's got a pit. There's some people that have more than others, and they're willing to share. So I think, yes, would it be great for more government funding? Absolutely. Nobody knows that more than the provincial branches that are trying tooth and nail to get these grants, to get the community involved. But if we only have what we have, what can we do to squeeze the most out of that lemon, right? So what are the things that are going to have the most impact? Because I think sometimes, like I've had athletes come up to me and they say that they need this, and I'm like, think about it. It's a bell and it's a whistle, but is it what you absolutely need? There's some basics, and if you, and maybe, I don't know if you all agree with this, what gets you to the top level is doing the basic things the best. You don't need all of the, like necessarily like the 1080 system. If you have it, that's great. I mean, listen, I love all the toys that you can get for track and field, but do you need it? What are the things what are your minimums that you absolutely need? And then who within the community can we leverage companies, sponsorships, things like that? I think sometimes we always are looking towards the government, and they can only do what they can do because they're not just sponsoring sport. They're sponsoring, they're giving funding for other sports as well. And to tell you the honest truth, track, we kind of have it if you talk to some other athletes in other sports like bobsleigh, geez Louise, boxing, some of these sports are on the precipice of not even being involved in the Olympics. They can't support their own. So in larger scheme of things, are we hockey? No. Are we ever going to be in Canada? No. But we are the summer option. So I think if we get, I think if we get creative and we start to get people who have deep pockets and they just want to be a part of something, and if I think sometimes in track and field are always like, nobody likes us, and I'm like, come on. I think if you can sell it, I think you can convince some people. So I think yes, there needs to be more, 100%. But we need to look at what are the basic things. What 5 meets do I need in my season to get to? How much is that going to cost? Who else is going to be there? Can I do cost sharing? Can I link up with other teams? Can I link up with other, like if I have a really good athlete and I know I can't go, is there a group going? Can I get my athlete with that group? So I think creativity is a part of it too. Until all of a sudden we're doing our thing, like Edmonton, amazing meet. And hopefully the athletes would agree that this is one of the best meets in Canada. Edmonton has always done a great job with the meets that we've had in the high performance series. And then once we keep doing that and showing that we have what it takes, then people will start to come in. But until then, how can we get creative? Like Sultana talking about going down to Lethbridge and the family. We have a great family. Let's leverage our family and then like start bringing in some people who've got the deep pockets to help support it, in my opinion. So any other questions from the audience? Please stand up if you, let's go right in front and then we'll go Neville in the back.
I have a question for Marco. It sounds like your brothers are very athletic as well. I'm curious, what about your brothers? So tell us, we're losing athletes, but are we also not identifying athletes if they had that opportunity as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, well, yeah, all my brothers are very athletic. However, not all of them had the same interest in sport as I did. We all got involved in some form of sport, mostly basketball, but I think the level of interest was just, it varied, and that was the first part. But the second part that you, in terms of like losing athletes, I do think there is so much potential out there. All of us here started in various different sports, and I'm sure there's a bunch of kids out there that are playing so many different sports and just doing, but they might not understand like what the best sport. Maybe they don't even have the interest. I think a good way to quote unquote not lose the athletes would probably be just encouraging them to try different sports. I think that was one thing for me growing up was the reluctance to run, to get on a track and compete. I was, I don't know what it was, just maybe the thought of I just had an idea of it that wasn't true, and going out there I had a lot of fun, and the encouragement that I got from my high school coach and friends and teammates, and that really helped me get involved in track and field and really got me to where I am today. I wouldn't have chose this sport on my own. I think going into those going into those schools and encouraging students to not only do sport but just live a healthy lifestyle. Maybe they'll find something that suits them, that they enjoy.
Neville in the back. Your question?
So this isn't one of those questions where, like, if you go in the past, what would you change? But more so, if you looking back at, well, looking now and then looking back then, for what you've learned now, is there something that you wish that earlier you, or in the beginning of your career, that you knew then that you know now? Whether it be in training, performance, or any aspect of your athletic career.
So kind of like, what advice would you give your younger self? That a little bit?
Something that's important that you wish you knew then that would probably help facilitate higher level of performance or opportunity or.
Anybody who wants?
Oh, yeah. Nothing is really standing out in my head right now. I think off the top of my head, I think there's probably 5 defining moments over my 20-year career where I look at it and it wasn't necessarily a roadblock, but it was like you have to choose your path, right? You got to choose your journey. Something's going to change. Did I make the right choice? And in those moments at that time, it was a hurdle that I didn't even know like how I was going to get over. And what choice I was going to make was completely going to define my future. And looking and sitting where I am now and looking back at those choices, I made very good choices. And I thank my parents for, giving me the ability to make those hard choices in those moments when you have that door closing on you. And I don't think I would change anything. I think I was given, had the support, I had the ability to make really good choices in moments of crisis. And I don't change anything. Yeah.
Anybody?
So had me thinking there, but yeah, just like Sultan said, I try not to like make any decisions that I think I would regret. So I've gotten to this point, and looking back, I think everything just happened for a reason, and I don't know if I, knowing what I know now, if I had known back then, I don't know if that would have changed where I am now, but I think there were a few things that I kind of had a feeling of, but I didn't really understand, and that was like some of the advice that I would be getting from like my parents and my coaches. Like I would hear it repeatedly, and just small things like I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but like later on in life, I would get like a realization, like, okay, that's what they meant. And I think just hearing them out, just maybe not like, I know it's hard for like, at least when I was a kid, I'd never really understood everything that was being told to me. It was just sometimes like the good advice was getting mixed in the lectures, and it was just somewhere in there was always a message, and I think it all came out of a place of love and support, and maybe I didn't realize it then, but over time it did dawn on me that they were like my parents, my coaches. They were just looking out for me, and they wanted what was best for me. So yeah, I think I was like kind of getting that same advice. I just didn't quite understand it until I got older. So yeah, I don't know if I would change anything.
I think like looking back on my career, even just now in the last few years, probably the only thing I would either change or maybe wish I had done just like slightly differently would be being like a little more forgiving of myself. I went to the Tokyo Olympics and it was my first time there. It was after COVID. I've been through a lot of stuff. Obviously, we all remember training through that. It was not an easy time, and I ended up placing, I think, 24th. I threw like 2.5 meters under my personal best. It was not a good like experience from like an athletic perspective for me. And looking at it now, like there were pieces of that that were really positive. Like that mark didn't represent what was there. Like I had thrown a throw that was a foul that was very far. And so something so small made that experience, could have gone very, very positively, but that small error in just like a growth perspective made that experience, in quote, very, very negative for me. So I went from, it could have gone either way, but it ended up going the negative route. And that post-Olympic experience, it was really hard. The mental side of, you know, coming off of that and trying to decide what you're going to do, decide if all of this had been worth it to that moment. You're doubting yourself, you're doubting your abilities, you're pretty much doubting your entire career to that moment and all of your choices that you've made to get to that success. And you're like, is that really what I just spent six years training for? Those 5 minutes of that wasn't what I had anticipated it being. And the thing is like you have to go through those moments. So I think like if you're really hard on yourself and you end up, you know, either quitting the sport or something, like, you know, you see athletes come out of these meets, not even just the Olympics, and they've had a really bad meet and they're like debating whether or not they're going to do track anymore, debating or not. It's just like a part of the learning experience. And I think like going through those are really crucial. And if you could just be like a little bit easier on yourself, you know that things change and you can continue to like change the narrative as you go through that. The following year was one of the best years I've ever had in track. So if I had thrown in the towel after that experience and like a couple of months of being extremely like sad and unhappy in the sport, I wouldn't be here at all. But I also think there's a part of that if I had been a little more gracious with myself, I probably could have got back on track a little bit faster. But that's the only thing.
I will say personally, there would be things I would change going back. So I'm looking for the time machine. No, I think I agree with all of you. I don't think I'm not regretting anything. I think there's always a moment in time when you go, I regret doing that because, you know, a lot of emotion, but after some time and you're able to look back and go, I could have made a different choice, but I don't regret because it got me to something. Whether or not it was the medal, whether or not it was getting to the final, or whether or not you're just in the ditch, it got you somewhere and you're able to take something out of it. I know for me, I probably would have embraced being uncomfortable a little bit more because I think I got too comfortable where I was. I had a good support system, but I think it changes over time and you get so comfortable, you're afraid to move when you should move. I trained a lot by myself. It was very, very difficult, but it seemed to work because I kept making teams. But I think I could have gotten more, squeezing more out of the lemon, so to speak, if I just would have been okay just saying, I need to leave. I know some athletes, they'll change coaches like underwear, and it's too much. I mean, change your underwear often, but it's like, you know, you're always looking. You don't always have to look for that magic because you are the magic. As an athlete, you are the magic. And to something that Sarah said, with coaches, you're a part of the journey. And I think sometimes I didn't own my successes and failures enough, and I gave it too much, a little bit to my coach, that my success was because of him. And I think the one great piece of advice that my dad gave me before my best Olympics, the 2004 Olympics, was that like before you go in your little, okay, back in the day, there was no media blockout, but you know, you go through that process of like turning off your phone. So I said, hey Dad, I'm heading into the first round. I'm going to turn off my little flip phone so nobody can get a hold of me. And he's like, okay, just remember this. You belong here. I lost it because I've never, like, he's always like, you got to be better. You got to be better. Because as parents do, there's good advice, but you don't hear it. And finally he said, just remember, what's that? It's mixed in with the lecture, right? Like, be better. But I think for me, hearing that, make sure that you remember you belong here. And that turned something for me that was like, I'm owning it. And all the things that my support system is giving me, my province, my teammates, my coaches, everything, it just clicked. And I think I wish I would have held on to that a little bit more instead of getting too comfortable and staying where I was, instead of pushing myself, maybe going to a different training group, maybe not forever, but a little bit just to turn the notches a little bit. I think that's one thing. I just wish I wasn't too comfortable and wasn't afraid to shake it up a little bit. So, do we have any other questions from the audience? Oh, yeah, a couple. So let's go right here in front.
This is actually for the ladies. Like as an
Oh.
educator and a mom and as a woman, I feel that women are, I would like your take on it, but I do feel like women are kind of non-athletic and you really have to shine for someone to see any potential in you. So when you talk about that lost potential, I think, what would be the early exposure that you think that girls, because I feel like girls are getting a message clearly in elementary that they are not athletic because they're not good at floor hockey.
Like throw like a girl? Like throw like a girl?
Yeah,
You
like-
throw like a girl?
You throw like you run like a
I thank you because I throw that really far.
but then that kind of like, oh, you're the weird in the room because you're the athletic girl. Or you're not athletic because you're doing 4 hours of figure skating and you're not playing soccer. So it's kind of like, what do you think that early exposure needs to be in elementary to give access, more access to young girls to make them think that they have the potential?
I think I ignored a lot of that noise because my mom put me in sports with boys. We didn't have a girls' baseball team, and my mom was like, I want you playing baseball with the boys. And I remember a very defining moment when I made the boys' traveling team, and I'm the only one out there, and a parent told his son to basically pitch to me, like hit me. And I was like, oh, Jesus. So I didn't hear that. My mom comes over to me and she's like, you need to be strong out there. You need to take that pitch and you need to take your base because you're not going to be, you're not going to be weak. You're not going to give in. You're going to do this. And I was like, yeah, that sounds fine. Because how hard is he really going to throw it at me? Don't care. I feel like I blocked a lot of that noise out because I was playing with the boys at such an early age and I just didn't care. I just wanted to play sport and I just wanted to be out there. Really, that ended up in parents having a fist fight in the in the parking lot after, and my mom taking me away from that because I felt like I did that. That was my problem because I'm a girl playing a boy's sport. And so she was like, this is not your fault. This has nothing to do with you. This has everything to do with the culture of the sport and the culture of how we talk about women and allow them to play in any sport. And so she was very supportive of me and never made me feel like I had any type of self-doubt as a woman and as a player and as an athlete. She always talked to me, you're an athlete, like you're not male, you're not female, you're not whatever, you are an athlete and you belong with the boys, you play ball, you figure skate, you do whatever you need to do. And so that conversation was kind of squashed early on, and I never made it a part of my day. I never thought I was different. I just was an athlete wanting to play a sport. And I don't know if I answered your question. I'm really sorry. No. I feel like my mom might have been a little bit ahead of her time. And what I was doing in a small town because I just didn't have access to female baseball. And I really liked playing baseball. And mom was like, you're going to go play with the boys. And I was like, sounds great. And I'm going to make this team. And I made the men's traveling team because I went out there as an athlete, did what I needed to do to make the traveling team. And so that was never a conversation with me of whether or not I was good enough to be a girl. I was an athlete to make a team.
Sarah?
I think that it still kind of comes with the messaging, like you're saying, the teachers aren't, the people surrounding young girls, their conversations need to change. I did not want to be a shot putter. I was like, that did not seem cool as a 15-year-old girl that I was like, oh yeah, I don't want to be that one. I was like, can I be anything but? Because the idea that all of a sudden I was the big, strong, beefy, girl, whew, I didn't want that at all. But it's what suited me. It was what was good. But I think it's the language around it is showing the young girls at such a young age that how cool it is to be strong. And you don't have to be beefy to be strong. But there's this inherent culture, I guess, around sports that in being athletic and being a girl is that you are kind of getting into this non-feminine role. But I mean, if you look around at like even like the women athletes here, like there's such a space for femininity in sport. And I think that starts at a young age of like empowering girls that like being athletic, being strong, and all of that is very, very cool and positive. But that definitely, sometimes it doesn't come from your parents. Sometimes it needs to come from an outside source. But giving girls that belief at a young age so that we can kind of like squash that narrative would be, I think, probably the most important thing. So I don't know if that's education for, teachers who are and coaches in sport in the high school realm, the younger realm. But there's definitely a lot of room for improvement in that. Because, yeah, when I was a young girl, I was like, not what I was looking for.
I will say, kind of going back on the coaching route there, of kind of that body shaming of like, you're a really big girl. Be like, yes, I am. And I'm very proud of my body. And so I go back into the high school and I see the shame in the girls of like, I don't want to move my body because like I just feel uncomfortable. And me walking in, I always walk in and I'm just like, I'm present, I'm here, I see you, I understand where you're at, and it gets better. And it's just building that confidence within those grade 8s and grade 9 girls of like, I don't know what happened to where that went wrong, or if it has been there the whole time, but just representation of like me coming in being like, hey, I was here where you're at and I got to like this level, and it's okay to be bigger. It's okay to have muscles. Like it's cool to squat 400 pounds. Like it's cool to do really weird things, and I loved moving my body. I love gymnastics. I love baseball. I love figure skating. But I hit puberty at figure skating and I was like, oh my God. Like I kept growing and kept having to change jumps, and my body changed at puberty, and I was not a figure skater anymore, and that's okay. And that was my transition into track and field, and lifting and throwing was who I was and where I found myself, and just having those supportive coaches and supportive teachers, and like, you're different, and it's great to be different, and yeah.
Yeah. It's surprising that in 2023, it seems to be, because we have, and I think here's the advantage of being in 2023, there's a whole host of role models to look at that were trailblazers, such as yourself, such as Sarah, and in different sports that now we can point to and say, they've had to go through this very gendered, like, you don't want to get too many muscles because guys won't like you. And now it's like, no, like we're starting to see that change. So I think the biggest thing is looking for those role models, especially if you have a girl, and being able to show them and say, like, femininity looks so many different ways, right? Like it's being able to show the representation, like you're saying, of what that looks like, and being able to say, listen, and ultimately at the end of the day, I think there's deeper seated issues, not just in sport, but in just in life in general, of identity for people and trying to figure that out. And sport plays into it. But I think there's a whole host of things like STEM. A lot of girls don't want to go into STEM because they don't see themselves. Numbers are for boys, words are for girls. But we're seeing way more trailblazers coming through. So I think it's just a matter of individually, if somebody wants to, and showing them the role models that are in male-dominated industries, but we're seeing a whole host of like just gender diversity throughout all industries, including sport. And I think pick up on those role models, be able to show that for somebody that's like wavering, they may be wavering. It's not girly, and it's like, well, look at who we have. They're very feminine, and they're very strong, and they're very beautiful. So, Robin, I know you had something. Yep.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I think a lot of the athletes and parents of athletes in the field are those athletes who are really motivated, have a lot of goals and big outcome goals. What's your biggest piece of advice for managing those internal and external pressures and those outcome goals?
Be patient. That's the biggest, like, patience. is like the biggest word, and you have to trust in the process, because yes, you have your goals, yes, you have your training plan, but like you're constantly looking at the end and not seeing what you're doing in that day to day. And I struggled with that as you know, I went through my career, and I'm just like, I just want to be over here, but you didn't go through the grind process. You just didn't lean in to the ick, because it's gonna suck, and you have to like find the best parts of the suck, and know that like you're going to get to the end of that suck, and it's going to be great. And those are the glass ceilings that you break, and the barriers you overcome, is when you're able to like be comfortable in being uncomfortable, and just trusting in the process and being patient.
Absolutely, patience is key. Yeah, to those athletes, I would maybe the same thing, just patience and trusting the process is so huge. And for me, what that looks like is just taking that. You can't get to your goals if you don't focus on the steps. You know, you just got to take it one step at a time. And yeah, when you take that step, it has to be intentional. You have to give your best effort, and you have to enjoy it. I think you know, you can get so caught up in the goal, the end goal, like where you want to be, that you overlook what's right in front of you. And yeah, you'd never get to where you want to be if you don't focus on the day to day, on the now being present. Yeah, and I think that goes for both ways. Like I don't want to say forget about the past, but you don't want to linger on to what was behind you for too long. And you also don't want to think too far ahead in the future. There's no moment like the present, and that's what's gonna get you to where you want to be. So just focusing on the present and being intentional and giving your best effort every single day. Eventually, it's not always going to be pretty. There's going to be a few off days. There's going to be some times when you feel like you're taking steps back, but just trusting the process and focusing on every single day. I think over time you might look back and realize that you've taken 100 or 1,000 steps and it didn't even feel like it, because time just moves like that. I've been in that position quite a few times, where I'm just focusing on just the present, and then I'll take a break and I'll stop and I'll look back and I'll be like, wow, I've actually made quite a bit of progress. So yeah, just enjoying the present, being patient, and trusting the process.
The only thing I'm going to add, because both of those are pretty much exactly like what you need to do to be here, write it down. Like, have a journal, have a piece of paper, something that you see every day if there's like this big goal you want to do. Because when you see it every day, it reminds you what you need to do every day to get to that goal. So if you just write it down at the beginning of the season, and it's just kind of in your mind, it's kind of over here, and you're like, okay, I'm training, but that's what I want to get to. But they're not like, you're not making that like mental connection in your brain. So the biggest thing is I would just write it down so that you see it every day. You wake up, you see your goal, you're like, oh, okay. So that reminder for when you're at practice, for when you're, choosing what you're going to eat, for when you're choosing what you're going to do, so that your commitment matches the outcome of the goal and that you are putting in the work needed to get there.
Bathroom mirrors are great places to put those things. Get yourself some lip liner and put it on a bathroom mirror, because that is a great place.
Because you're going to go to the bathroom at some point, right? I know that, okay, it has to be very, very quick. Is it going to be a quick one? Or do we want to take this off? We have like maybe 3 minutes, so ask, and then we'll just rapid fire.
I work with younger kids, and I always find the biggest deterrent is how do you afford a sports psychologist, a chiropractor, acupuncture, massage, on and on and on. So at your level, how do you manage that?
Sorry, what age group? Because I think you have to know. Yeah. Well, I will say this, and I'll take this real quick, and then but I'll say, at high school, I never had any of that. And I didn't need to, because I didn't even have like maybe physio when I hurt myself, but I didn't need it because I'm young. I don't have a lot of the hiccups that come with being in sports. So I think what we do is we see the high level athletes and go, well, then I need to do this for but a lot of us never had any of that until we went to the high level. And at that point, it's usually provided with you getting to the next level, or you're able to make that work, making deals with a lot of therapists will do things on the cheap for athletes that are up and coming. So again, reaching out to the community, and then let's just go down the line and talk about that real quick.
Yeah, I had my first massage when I went to university. So like, I was training as much as I was, and you know, like I didn't have that integrated support system, and I came from a small town. Nobody really put, you know, healthcare first, and I was just kind of working off of my parents' benefits of like, oops, I kind of hurt myself. I rolled my ankle, you know, like we're going to go to physio for a while. But like that was not factored into really, you know, I'm training 6 times a week in high school and I'm seeing these therapists. I don't know what the answer to that is. It's like I just did basics really well. And if something kind of like popped off, then we went down that route of helping it, fixing it, or trying to, you know, get a better game plan. But at that time when I was in high school in that age bracket, no, I didn't have therapy.
Yeah, as Angela said, and Sultan as well, I sort of the same thing when I first started out. It was just very basic, just doing what was necessary to get to that level where that stuff was provided. And even I never even knew sports psychology was as important as it was until I got to university. But yeah, I think showing up in practice, like all of that stuff was basically my coach. He was like my coach, my sports psychologist, my physio. He would just sort of give me like the basics. Like I need to take care of myself. Like if I was feeling down or if there was something at home going on, then maybe just take it easy at practice. Like that was what really helped me get by. And then eventually I've got to a level of high performance where every single percent matters. But when I was in high school, I didn't have to worry about the 0.01% of training. It was just sort of doing what was necessary to get to that level, and I think that was essential.
Would you say that your warm-ups and cool-downs were part of it?
Yeah, there was no getting around that.
Yeah, similar to Marco talking about the percentages, is I had a really good analogy given to me once, is like, you have all these bars as an athlete, and like they're at different levels depending on where you are in your journey. And so sometimes, you know, you come into university, maybe your sleep bar is really low. That's something that is involved in like your injury rate and how you feel in your recovery. And then maybe, you know, before you get physiotherapy and barring any like major injuries, like you want to work on getting your sleep bar up so that you're more recovered for practice, so that you can handle the training load a little bit better. Or, you know, same thing with like warming up, like making sure that warm up is maximized as well. And same thing with like stretching and recovery. Like you want to make sure that all of those bars are maxed. And then you can move on to, like, again, barring any major injuries and stuff that actually does require like medical attention. Those are the things that help on top of the recovery. But if you're, you know, not doing the necessary steps at the beginning, like sometimes the therapy and stuff, that's just like a Band-Aid. So then you're paying for a Band-Aid fix, and then that continues to dig the well deeper of like how much financially you're putting into it. So I think that you need to make sure that all the other bars are maxed before, especially as a high school athlete, before you start digging into kind of like that 1%, kind of the stuff that, you know, gets you through like training as like a high performance athlete.
At that age bracket, like I think sleep is crucial. Especially in that high school range when everyone's growing and everybody's like bodies is changing. Sleep is huge, and food and nutrition is huge. And if anything pops up and any type of injury, I would say like, yes, go and put an intervention in there. But as part of your daily, like, you know, training program, I don't know if it's necessary when you have to have sleep and you have to have nutrition.
Well, we've gone well over time. That's just because we're having great conversations with some fantastic athletes. So in summary, good support systems being able to see who's around you. So if you don't have the financial support there's ways to get it done. So being creative, multi-sport athletes from a young age and being able to continue to use that, perseverance, but also patience. I think those are some of the hallmarks that came out of the athlete panel here. So again, I would like to thank on behalf of Edmonton, the Track and Field Council, Athletics Alberta, thank you all for being here. Thank you for imparting your wisdom, your experience, your knowledge to this group. I'm not too sure I know athletes, you got to go and get ready. I don't know if you'll have some time if somebody wants to ask something, but if you're around, that'd be great. Sultan and I, we're just here. So, I mean, you can always pick our brains. I know we're the old ones. I'm not retired just yet, okay? Okay, but again, like if there's anything, we're one community. There's a lot of resources and people and knowledge. Neville, he's a track guy who went bobsleigh. He's got a great experience. We have Heather Stacy here, another Olympian, multiple Olympians just in the audience as well. There's so much perspective. There's so much wealth of knowledge just within Alberta, across Canada, all the provinces, and also the coaches that are here. So again, on behalf of, first, I'd like also to thank Athletics Alberta, the Edmonton Track and Field Council, for putting this on. I think that this is kind of the hallmark and where we need to go with all of our meets in Canada and inviting the world to us. So for those of you in the audience that are from out of town, I see at least one, Avery, back there. Thank you so much for all the athletes and everybody that's here. We'll see you on Sundays. We'll see you tomorrow at Footfield. We're hoping for some great weather. But regardless, rain or shine, we're going to be out there, except for lightning. But we're going to be out there to support these amazing athletes as they compete. Again, thank you all so much for your time, for sharing. That's crucial, and we really appreciate it. Thank you all so much for being here.